My mom and uncle stole my inheritance and kept me away from my dad's company for 10 years. Then my sister found a hidden letter that exposed their crime. I, 28 male, recently discovered something that has completely shattered my relationship with my entire family. What I found out has made me question everything I thought I knew about my family and their supposed love for me. Let me give you the full background so you can understand how deep this betrayal goes. My father was an incredible man who built his construction company from nothing. He started with just a truck and some tools, working small renovation jobs on weekends while keeping his regular job. Over 25 years, he grew it into one of the most respected construction companies in our area. I spent every summer from age 13 working at job sites, learning everything I could from the ground up. My father always said he was teaching me because someday this would all be mine. My uncle Dave, 55 male, joined the company about 15 years before my father's death. He had lost his job during a recession, and my father, being the kind person he was, brought him in despite having no construction experience. My father taught him everything, just like he was teaching me. Uncle Dave became my father's right-hand man, and I looked up to both of them growing up. When I was 18, my father died in a car accident. It was sudden and devastating. I was just about to graduate high school, and we had been making plans for me to start working full-time at the company while taking some business classes at the local college. But after his death, everything changed. My mother Sarah, 52 female, and Uncle Dave sat me down and convinced me that my father would have wanted me to get a proper education first. They told me the company would always be there waiting for me, but education had to come first. My mother cried about how my father's biggest regret was not going to college himself, and how he had always wanted better for me. Uncle Dave backed her up, saying my father had often discussed wanting me to get a degree before joining the company full-time. Since I was young and grieving, I believed them. I went to college and got my degree in business management, graduating with honors. The whole time, I stayed in touch with the company, asking questions about how things were going and making suggestions based on what I was learning. My mother and uncle would smile and nod, but they never really implemented any of my ideas. I didn't think much of it at the time. After graduation, I was excited to finally join the company. But my mother and uncle had other plans. They said I needed real-world experience first. They suggested I work for other construction companies to learn how different businesses operate. It didn't make sense to me. I already had years of experience from working with my father, plus my degree. But they insisted this was best for my professional development. I trusted them and followed their advice. I found a job with another construction company and worked hard to gain more experience. Every few months, I would bring up joining the family business, but there was always some excuse. The timing wasn't right. The economy was uncertain. They were restructuring. They needed to stabilize first. What really started raising red flags was when they hired my cousin Mike, 30M. Mike had been working as a gym trainer and had zero construction or business experience. Yet suddenly, he was given a management position in the company. When I questioned this, Uncle Dave said they needed fresh perspectives and that Mike had leadership qualities. I was hurt, but I still didn't suspect the full truth. This went on for 6 years. I watched from the sidelines as they expanded the business, took on bigger projects, and hired more people, everyone except me. They kept saying I wasn't ready, even though I had more experience and education than most of their new hires. I started feeling like something wasn't right, but I couldn't imagine my own family would deliberately keep me away from what my father had built for me. Then last month, I ran into Tom, 65M, my father's old friend and former accountant. He had retired a few years ago, and we hadn't kept in touch. We got talking about old times, and he asked how I was enjoying running the company. When I told him I wasn't involved in the company, his whole demeanor changed. He looked shocked and then angry. That's when he dropped the bombshell. My father had left explicit instructions in his will. The company was supposed to be split 60-40 between me and my mother when I turned 21, with the understanding that I would gradually take over operations. Tom had helped my father draft these instructions himself. He couldn't believe they hadn't followed through with it. I felt like my whole world was crumbling. For 10 years, they had been lying to me. They had stolen my inheritance, my future, my chance to continue my father's legacy. When I confronted my mother, she broke down crying, but her tears weren't from remorse, they were from being caught. She tried to justify their actions, saying they only did it because they thought I was too young and inexperienced at 21. She claimed they were protecting me, that they planned to bring me in eventually. But when I demanded to see all the company documentation and financial records, both she and Uncle Dave became defensive and hostile. Uncle Dave started yelling about how ungrateful I was. He brought up how they had paid for my college, with what I now know was my own inheritance money, and helped me get started in my career. My cousin Mike joined in, calling me selfish and accusing me of trying to destroy the family with my demands. I've already consulted a lawyer who says I have a strong case. The will's instructions were clear, and their actions over the past decade show a deliberate pattern of deception. I'm moving forward with legal action to claim what's rightfully mine, even though my mother is now playing the victim, crying to everyone about how I'm tearing the family apart over money. The only person who's somewhat supporting me is my sister Emma, 25F. She revealed that she had her own suspicions about how the company was being run, but she was afraid to say anything. The rest of the family has either turned against me or is staying quiet to avoid drama. They keep calling and texting, telling me to drop the lawsuit for the sake of family peace. I've blocked most of their numbers because I'm tired of their guilt tripping. This isn't just about money, it's about a decade of lies and my father's final wishes being completely disregarded by the people who claim to love him most. Aita for pursuing this legally and potentially destroying my relationship with my family? Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my original post, and the situation has gotten significantly worse than I could have imagined. First, I want to thank everyone who offered support and advice. You were all right, this was never about money, but about years of deliberate deception. After I filed the lawsuit, my mother and uncle launched what I can only describe as a full-scale campaign to get me to drop it. They started with what they probably thought was a generous offer, a 15% share in the company and a position as a junior manager, essentially working under my cousin Mike. When I refused, my mother broke down crying, saying I was being stubborn just like my father. She said they were trying to make things right, but I was too angry to see it. Uncle Dave then tried a different approach. He started reaching out to my friends and colleagues in the construction industry, telling them I was trying to take over the company out of greed. He even contacted my current employer, implying that I was using company time to pursue my lawsuit. Thankfully, my boss knows me well enough not to believe these accusations. They also tried using the extended family against me. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I haven't spoken to in years suddenly started calling and messaging me. Some tried guilt-tripping, saying my father would be ashamed of me for suing my own mother. Others made veiled threats about how this would affect my future in the industry. A few even offered to mediate the situation, though I later found out they were just trying to gather information from my mother and uncle. But everything changed drastically yesterday when my sister Emma called me crying. She had been going through our father's old home office, the one my mother claimed she had cleaned out years ago. Emma had recently moved back home temporarily to help our mother cope with the stress of the lawsuit, and she found the office mostly untouched, just hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Among stacks of old documents and photos, Emma found a letter addressed to me, dated just a week before my father's death. She said her hands were shaking so badly she could barely read it, but what she found made her physically sick. The letter revealed a truth that made our current situation seem almost small in comparison. According to the letter, the construction company wasn't solely my father's creation. His best friend Jack, who died 2 years before him, was actually a silent partner who provided the initial funding to start the business. Jack had been a successful real estate developer who believed in my father's vision. When Jack died of cancer, he left his share of the company to be split between me and Emma when we turned 21. My father wrote that he had documented all of this in his will, along with instructions about his own share. The letter went on to explain why Jack had stayed a silent partner. He had wanted to give my father full credit for building the company, knowing how much pride my father took in being a self-made man. They had agreed that Jack's involvement would become public only after both of them were gone, when the shares were transferred to me and Emma. Emma didn't stop there. Once she found the letter, she started searching through everything in the office. She discovered files showing that Uncle Dave had known about Jack's involvement the whole time. In fact, he had been the one who suggested to our mother that they should keep this information from us after our father's death. But the betrayal goes even deeper. Emma found evidence that Uncle Dave had been gradually transferring company assets to smaller companies registered under his and Mike's names. These transfers started just months after our father died, right around the time they were convincing me to go to college instead of joining the company. I immediately sent all this information to my lawyer. Somehow, word got out about what Emma had found. That's when things turned ugly. Our cousin Mike showed up at Emma's apartment late last night, pounding on her door and demanding she hand over any documents she had taken from the office. He was shouting so loudly that her neighbors called the police. Emma was terrified. She had never seen Mike act like this before. The family has now split into 3 distinct groups. The first group, led by Uncle Dave's sister and her husband, are still defending my mother and uncle. They claim there must be a reasonable explanation for everything, and that Emma and I are misinterpreting innocent business decisions. The second group, mostly younger cousins and some of my father's siblings, are furious about the deception and have openly taken our side. The third group is trying to stay neutral while clearly feeding information back to both sides. My mother has now taken to her bed, claiming that all this stress is affecting her health. Her sister is telling everyone that Emma and I are killing our mother with our selfish actions. But we're not backing down. The lawyer says this new information completely changes the scope of our case. We're not just looking at a civil suit over inheritance anymore, there could be criminal charges involved due to the asset transfers. Emma is staying with me now because she doesn't feel safe at home anymore. She's worried about what other documents might be hidden in that office, but she's also afraid to go back and look. We've hired a private security company to watch both our apartments because we don't trust how desperate our family might become. This whole situation has revealed a side of our family we never knew existed. People we grew up trusting and loving have shown themselves capable of not just lying to us, but potentially committing fraud and now making threats. Emma keeps asking if we're doing the right thing by pursuing this, but I don't see how we can back down now. This isn't just about our inheritance anymore, it's about exposing years of deliberate deception and possible criminal activity. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and what we've uncovered has turned our world upside down. The investigation into the company's finances revealed something so shocking that it's still hard for me to process it. Remember how my mother claimed they kept us away from the company to protect us? Well, she was actually telling a partial truth, just not in the way any of us expected. After our last update, the forensic accountants hired by our lawyer started digging deep into the company's financial records. They found irregularities that didn't make sense, projects with inflated costs, subcontractors that couldn't be traced, and cash flows that didn't match the company's legitimate operations. At first, we thought it might just be creative accounting to avoid taxes, but it was much worse. The investigation revealed that Uncle Dave had been using the company to launder money for years. He had set up an elaborate network of fake subcontractors and shell companies, all designed to clean illegal money coming from who knows where. The asset transfers we found were just one part of a much larger operation. These shell companies would submit fake invoices for work that was never done, and the money would be cleaned through our legitimate business operations. My cousin Mike wasn't just involved, he was actively managing many of these fake companies. His sudden position in the company made sense now. They needed someone they could trust to help manage their illegal operations, and who better than Uncle Dave's own son. Mike's lack of construction experience didn't matter because his real job had nothing to do with construction. The most heartbreaking part was discovering my mother's role in all this. When we confronted her with the evidence, she finally broke down and told us everything. According to her, it all started shortly after my father died. The company was struggling due to the recession, and Uncle Dave came to her with a proposal. He had connections who could help keep the company afloat through some creative financing. At first, it was supposed to be temporary, just enough to get through the tough times. But once they started, they couldn't stop. The illegal money became such a crucial part of the company's cash flow that they couldn't operate without it. My mother claims she wanted to protect me and Emma by keeping us away until they could clean everything up, but instead, they just got deeper and deeper into the criminal operation. The police are now fully involved. They raided the company offices last week and arrested Uncle Dave and Mike. The look on Mike's face as they let him out in handcuffs will haunt me forever, not because I felt sorry for him, but because he was smirking like none of this really mattered. My mother is cooperating with the authorities, hoping for leniency, but she's still likely facing charges for her role in the money laundering scheme. The impact on the business has been catastrophic. All our company's assets have been frozen pending investigation. Many of our major clients have canceled their contracts after hearing about the arrests. We're trying to save the legitimate parts of the business, but it's nearly impossible when we can't access any funds or equipment. The worst part is the effect on our innocent employees. People who had nothing to do with the illegal activities are now out of work. Some of them had been with the company since my father's time. They trusted us with their livelihoods, and now they're suffering because of my uncle's greed. I've been trying to help them find new positions with other construction companies, but it's difficult when our company's name has become toxic in the industry. The family has completely imploded. Those who vehemently defended my mother and uncle are now claiming they had no idea what was really going on. The ones who tried to stay neutral are saying they always suspected something wasn't right. Nobody wants to admit they were fooled for so long. Emma found some old photos of our father and Uncle Dave in the office. They were standing together at various job sites, smiling and looking like real brothers. She broke down crying, asking how Uncle Dave could do this to his own brother's legacy. I wish I had an answer for her. I keep thinking about my father's letter and his friendship with Jack. They built something legitimate together, something they were proud of. In just 10 years, my uncle and mother turned it into a front for criminal activity. Every time I think about it, I feel physically sick. Our lawyer says we should focus on cooperating with the authorities and documenting everything we find. There's a chance we might be able to salvage something from this mess, but right now, that feels like a distant possibility. The company my father spent his life building is probably gone forever, destroyed not by market forces or bad luck, but by the greed and betrayal of the people he trusted most. Update 3. 6 months have passed since my last update, and I'm finally ready to share what's happened since then. The legal proceedings have moved forward, bringing both closure and new complications to our family situation. Uncle Dave and Mike's criminal trial has concluded. They both received significant prison sentences. Uncle Dave got 15 years, and Mike got 8 years for their roles in the money laundering operation. The investigation revealed they had laundered over $50 million through the company over the past decade. My mother, due to her cooperation with authorities and her lawyers successfully arguing that she was manipulated by Uncle Dave, received a lighter sentence of 3 years with possibility of parole. The most surprising development came during the trial when we learned the full extent of Uncle Dave's betrayal. It turns out he had started his illegal operations even before my father died. He had been embezzling small amounts and setting up his network of fake companies while my father was still alive. The prosecutors believe the stress of discovering this might have contributed to my father's fatal car accident. They found evidence that he had confronted Uncle Dave about some financial discrepancies just days before his death. The company itself couldn't be saved. The government seized most of the assets, and the remaining legitimate parts weren't enough to keep it running. Emma and I managed to recover a small portion of the equipment and some of the client contracts that weren't tainted by the illegal activities. We've started a new, smaller construction company, completely separate from the original one. We named it after our father and Jack, honoring their honest partnership. Some of the long-term employees who had worked with our father chose to join us. Their loyalty and belief in us has been the only bright spot in this whole mess. We're starting small, taking on residential projects and slowly rebuilding our reputation in the industry. It's nothing like the success of the original company, but at least it's honest work. The family remains fractured beyond repair. Uncle Dave's kids, except for Mike who's in prison, have changed their last names and moved away. My mother's sisters still blame me and Emma for destroying the family by not handling things privately. They've been spreading rumors that we orchestrated the whole investigation out of greed and jealousy. The most hurtful part has been dealing with my mother's side of the family. They've started a smear campaign against us in our community, claiming we abandoned our mother in her time of need. They conveniently forget that she actively participated in criminal activities and lied to us for years. Some of them even had the audacity to ask for jobs in our new company, as if the past year never happened. Emma and I have gone completely no contact with everyone except 3 cousins who supported us throughout this ordeal. We've changed our phone numbers and moved to a different part of town. Our new company is growing slowly but steadily, built on the principles our father originally believed in: honest work, fair prices, and quality construction. Sometimes I wonder if we should have handled things differently. Maybe we could have found a way to clean up the company quietly, without involving the authorities. But then I remember my father's letter and the honest partnership he had with Jack. I know we made the right choice in exposing everything, even if it meant losing our family in the process. I still visit my father's grave every month. Last time, I brought the original blueprints of the first building he and Jack built together. I found them in that hidden office, untouched by Uncle Dave's corruption. I promised him that Emma and I would rebuild his legacy the right way, no matter how long it takes. For those wondering about the future, we're focused on growing our new business and healing from the trauma of the past year. We may have lost our family, but we've gained something more valuable, the knowledge that we stayed true to our father's principles, even when it cost us everything else.